This is a series of gouache paintings that I made based on stills that I pulled from 8mm movies that my dad and my grandfather made in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I spent a summer digitizing all of these films, and I found that some of these images, when captured, isolated, and painting, created really interesting narratives all by themselves. So this one is a crowd of spectators at the races. So going to the races, a really popular pastime in my family. And I thought, most of the film is of the cars going around the track, but every now and then my uncle, who I think is the one who was filming this, would pan towards the audience. So painting people in crowds, and I'll hold this up a little bit so that you can see it a little more closely. A lot of times it's just painting little blobs and little shapes, and you're not really painting a lot of detail. It's more about looking at the values and the colors and how they're distributed. In my gouache paintings, I also like to work dark to light and light to dark, back and forth. So you can see on the trees here, initially I'd paint the tree, then I'd paint the light sky behind it, and then I'd paint the branches again, and then go back and forth until I got it where I want it. So the process really creates an interesting surface and a really rich surface. So I would say when I make paintings, I never get them right the first time. So you should feel free to just keep painting until it's good. That's what I tell myself. So another funny thing, there was a film of this bonfire. I didn't know what was going on here. I asked my mom about it, and apparently at the end of every school year, this was in the 50s, they would burn all the surplus furniture. So these are all desks and chairs. You can see like a leg there. And they would have this massive bonfire in the school parking lot, I guess, and just burn what they weren't using, which really seems wasteful by today's standards, but made for a really interesting image. So here I'm using a kind of hatching and blending technique to create the flicker of the edge of the fire there. And you can see gouache really makes a nice flat color if you want to create a flat space in your paintings. I really love this one, and there's something kind of hinky with this Logitech camera. Hope you're listening, Logitech. I don't understand why this is happening. Did a lot of web searches trying to figure it out. But there's something that happens in the value of my paintings where it's like the camera doesn't know how to read it, and it creates these little weird glitches. So anyway, I really love this painting because it looks a little bit like the twins in The Shining, even though these are my cousins, not the twins from The Shining, but there's something kind of eerie about this. It's like 1950s modernist tract home, car, kids, the nuclear family in the suburbs. And there's just, even though I know these people and these are lovely people, there's something a little bit creepy about this image, which I kind of like. And I'll hold it up a little closer so you can see the detail of how those little figures are painted. And I sit and just paint and paint and paint until I get it right. And I really love painting grass using these hatching movements here with the brush. And, this is more of a flat technique. So there's a couple different techniques used in this painting. Typically, these gouache paintings are made in one sitting. So this is one day's worth of work. Each of these represents a day of painting. And by a day, I mean about anywhere between 5 and 8 hours of painting. So you can see why a real-time video would be very unappealing to watch because honestly, when I was a student, I hated watching my teachers paint for hours and hours and hours when all I really wanted to do was make a painting myself. So I like to show these finished paintings and just talk about the technique a little bit and then do little mini demos of various techniques so that I don't bore everyone to tears. So this painting is a nice one to see for this because it uses this technique here, which is really specific to gouache. I laid down this color and then I scrubbed out to make the beams of light here. And this is damaged film. I actually prefer to paint the damage. I'm also using some watercolor techniques here. Here's a bloom. And this scrubbing out of color, this is something you can do with gouache that you can't really do with watercolor because watercolor really stains. You can lift it to an extent, but you can't render it like you can this. And of course, once acrylic dries, it's permanent. You can scrub out acrylic paint while it's still wet, But once it's dry, it's dry. So with gouache, even though it's perfectly dry, I could go in there with a brush right now and extend these lines and scrub them out and make them a little bit longer if I wanted to, which I love because it allows you to change your mind and play a little bit more with the paint. So I have a couple over here. This one is a one sitting painting of a storm. And you can see here, I'll pull it up a little bit. These are some just straight up watercolor techniques. Except for one thing I love about gouache is going back in with that white. So the lightning bolt there is painted with white gouache. And I remember I had a watercolor teacher who was quite the purist, and he would always say, only use the white of the paper. Do not ever go back in with white paint or gouache. And, you know, as a teacher and as an artist, I think every artist finds their own way to make paintings. Like you can work with a lot of different teachers and they'll show you lots of different ways to do lots of different things. And some teachers will say, this is the only way to do it. This is my way to do it. And some will want just kind of set you loose and let you fail over and over again until you find your own way. I like to find the middle road. I'll show a lot of technique, but in the end, I really prefer for students to find their own way to make paintings. You know, I would have been marked down for doing something like this in my watercolor class as a student. And I just think that's a little bit preposterous. Here's another one of those little one sitting paintings, and you can see the Logitech camera here hates this painting. I really like this painting, and I'm going to move it up a little closer here so you can see how I use the white. So I painted in the big storm cloud, but then at the end I go back in with the white and I just pop those white highlights, you know, in this part right here to really like create that drama in the painting, because that place in the painting, especially in landscape painting like this where light meets dark, that's like that moment of drama, especially in a storm. So being able to go back in with that white gouache for me is essential to my practice. This one has another way of blending that I thought might be nice to show you. And I'll hold it up here so you can see it closely. So see all that hatching? It's got a big glitch on it too, which I really apologize for that, but I do not know how to fix it. I'm a painter, not tech support, so I'm just doing the best I can. And you can see those brush strokes there, I'm hatching. So when you learn to draw, you learn to hatch. And hatching is just a really, really cool technique in gouache too. So sometimes instead of the perfect kind of gradation that I use in a lot of my work, I'll switch to something like this with these little hatch marks just because it's really fun to do. And I think it gives a different look to the painting. And sometimes that's what you want. So experiment with a lot of those different techniques. And I had planned to show everyone these scrub paintings, but look what's happened. It's gone completely glitch. It's actually kind of cool looking like that. Maybe I should screenshot this and then paint the glitch. I don't know. But I put this in here because I often paint the same scene more than once using different techniques to see which technique is best. So this is a monochromatic, just scrubbing, really transparent technique. This is using full opacity with the gouache. And this one is a monochromatic painting that also the camera hates. So maybe we'll just get rid of that and leave it here. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into how gouache works. And in this one, you can really see, if I hold it up, the sky is painted last. Actually put a blue wash down for the sky, then painted the city, and then went back in with white on top of the blue. And see how that blue's bleeding through there? So with gouache, you can layer colors, but a lot of times the color underneath will bleed through. And when people first start, they get frustrated by that. They're like, oh gosh, I want to cover this up, but I can't. What you should do is use that to your advantage. So this is a blue, and you can see if you look at the corner of the painting here, see right there? That's that darker blue there is the original blue, and then I just layered that white right on top, and I let them bleed together. So, you know, sometimes it's better not to fight the paint. Let the paint do what the paint does. Learn what the paint does, and then work with that instead of trying to fight it all the time. So if you haven't tried gouache yet, and you have a set, or you have something around, why don't you just try experimenting with it a little bit? Work light to dark, work dark to light, try some watercolor technique, try layering the paint. Just see what it does, and then as you become more comfortable with it, you can start making some actual paintings. I don't know why that went out of focus.